Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Dunifon again, coming to you with a continuation of our STEM education construct series. Today, we're going to be talking about STEM engagement as an idea. And STEM engagement is really recognized quite differently in their literature, depending on the place of practice, obviously quite different in formal and informal education, quite different in informal education and science communication. So we're going to talk first about some of the differences in how researchers are conceptualizing what STEM engagement really looks like. And there is a lacking, we are lacking a uniform definition of STEM engagement. Activation Lab has defined it as one's focus, participation, and persistence on a task. And CASE, the Center for Advancement of Informal Science Education, conducted a series of interviews with STEM education experts, mostly researchers and evaluators, pertaining to STEM engagement and what STEM engagement means for them and their work. So I'm just highlighting two examples here, but if you're interested in what the other folks had to say, please do click on that link when the slides are uploaded so that you can check out all, I believe there's 11 of them, different interviews. So Dr. Sarah Yo, an assistant professor of communication at the University of Utah, who really specializes in that science communication space, defines STEM engagement as engagement with science on social media. Whereas Dr. Christian Shun, professor of psychology, learning science and policy and intelligent systems at the University of Pittsburgh, views it as what is happening in the moment when a learner is experiencing an exhibit, classroom activity, or other learning experience. In other words, it's the characteristics of that individual experience. And he notes that there are different elements to STEM engagement, particularly affective, cognitive, and behavioral features. So affective, as a characteristic of STEM engagement, could look at, is somebody enjoying the task that they're doing? How do they feel about the task or the activity that they're participating in? Cognitive would be looking at what parts of the brain are lighting up. Are they applying skills that they have? Are they using critical thinking? And behavioral would look at physically, kind of how are they engaging with the activity. So this could be something like if a student is really hands-on with a museum exhibit or in a group project is taking charge and being a leader or really participating actively. I thought this was pretty interesting. Dr. Shun and then graduate student, now Dr. Paulette Vincent-Ruse, note that affective, cognitive, and behavioral engagement do not always happen in tandem. So you might have situations where behavioral engagement is really being activated, whereas affective and cognitive are not. Or you might have a situation where affective and behavioral are really being lit up, whereas cognitive is not. So we'll talk about this in a moment, but it could be quite important to isolate which characteristic you're really talking about if you're looking to assess the STEM engagement in your work. And other researchers have recognized that social engagement is something that we could add to that list of characteristics, as well as conceptual to consequential engagement, which is really the application of knowledge and skills. So quite similar to that cognitive engagement piece. And so how can we measure STEM engagement then? Well, there's a number of different ways that researchers are playing with in the field. Dr. Yo, who again is focused on science communication, has noted that engagement can be a really useful metric to evaluate the success of science communication. And this could look like, your most basic things like number of tweets and comments and retweets, the number of likes, what types of comments you're getting, and other forms of social media engagement. Dr. Shun and Dr. Vincent-Ruse recommended using short surveys. And again, knowing that those characteristics of STEM engagement are different and not always kind of seen at the same time, isolating really which one you're trying to look at would be a good strategy. So for example, a question that you could craft would be, to what extent was your student actively participating in this experiment? Maybe that's a question for a caregiver or a teacher, secondhand instead of self-report. And that would really isolate a behavioral STEM engagement characteristic. In many cases in the literature, self-report surveys seem to be the go-to, but some researchers are experimenting with things like observations, wearable technologies, interviews, time and attention spent at an exhibit, and other methods. And there were two tools that I found that I thought were pretty relevant to the work that we do here at SAI. The first is the Conceptual Change Cognitive Engagement Scales. And this is a set of scales designed to measure engagement along a continuum of misconception of an idea to scientifically accepted conception. So if you're dealing with anything related to scientific misinformation, this would be a really great scale to take a look at, or set of skills. And it uses items that address the credibility, plausibility, and coherence of a message. So one of the items in that set of skills is while reading the text, I thought about whether the information made logical sense. And then Activation Lab also has an engagement survey that was designed for use with 10 to 14-year-olds, specifically immediately after a science activity. So you'd want to administer this either on-site or immediately after if it's virtual, but it can work in either the formal or informal learning environment. And it includes items like, during this activity, time went by quickly. They also produced an observation protocol, so you can take a look at that and see if that's something that you could potentially adapt. This specific protocol is designed for trained observers, and it looks at cognitive, behavioral, and affective engagement. So if you're interested in more about what it looks like to break down those different characteristics and what questions or what things you might look for if you're being an observer, that would be a great instrument to take a look at. So I hope you learned a little bit more today about STEM engagement, and thanks again for following along.